this computer. Okay, Josh, thank you very much for coming on to have a chat. Um, it's been a while since I had somebody on who has so much expertise in the nutrition domain. Maybe just for people who don't know about you, and to get a bit of background about yourself, how did you get into, well, fitness and coaching, and then now you're a registered dietitian. So what was that process for you?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me. I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't know who I am. I suppose my journey started, I think, similar to yours, Killian, where we both went to St Andrews College school here in Dublin, and we had a coach there, David Jones, who kind of, I suppose, was like my first mentor in the
Mm,
industry, and he coached us in the gym there in Andrews, and just really got into strength and conditioning that way, I suppose. And then did a undergraduate degree in exercise science in Limerick, to kind of pursue that passion of mine, I suppose. Which was all very, it was an amazing degree, but it was very much sport focused, and I always kind of found myself
mhm.
enjoying the any health focused modules a bit more rather than maybe the sport athletic focused ones.
Yeah.
But then I went on to do a master's in exercise physiology, and throughout this time I was kind of doing a few internships. I was coaching a little bit online and like doing a bit of small strength and conditioning coaching as well. So I did a master's in exercise physiology over in Loughborough in the UK.
Mhm.
And again, that was like really performance athletic focused. But again, there was a few modules that were health focused. And I was like, God, I really, really enjoy this stuff. I know there was like at the same time as that master's, like in Loughborough, there was another master's called, like, I think it was exercise as medicine. And I was like, God, I wish maybe I'd done that master's.
Mhm.
Then I came back to Ireland and started working in a gym here in Dublin. And did a lot of personal training, and I still do a lot of personal training. And did some nutrition coaching and kind of got into the nutrition side of things a little bit more. And then COVID hit, and I had no job really.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I was in the
I
same
was
boat as
like,
well.
I was like, well, if I was, I suppose if I, wasn't a personal trainer in this case, maybe I would have had a job. Obviously, a lot of my friends could just transition online.
Yeah.
That was a bit more difficult for us to do. And I was like, you know what, if I, maybe if I'd done a master's in dietetics or become a dietitian, I could have maybe transitioned a bit more online. It would have kept me
Mhm.
going with the job. I always found with just the pure personal training side of things that, you're getting up at 5:30 every morning and you're finishing at 9 every night. It's hard to transition into a sustainable lifestyle. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to give, and with that massive interest in health, I was like, I'm going to give this master's a go in dietetics. So I did a 2 years master's in clinical nutrition and dietetics in UCD, and that allowed me to practice as a dietitian. So now I'm still working in the same gym in Blackrock, and I kind of kept my clients going throughout my master's, where I do kind of half personal training and half nutrition coaching, or I run my own nutrition clinic here in Blackrock, where I'm
Mhm.
practicing as a dietitian. And then one day a week, I work in a clinic in Dalkey, which is kind of a obesity, like a private obesity clinic, for patients living with obesity, where they can seek treatment. And I kind of run a program called My Best Weight Health,
Mhm.
which is focused on kind of maximizing the health of people living with obesity. So
Yeah.
that's what I do one day a week.
Great. And that's definitely something that I want to get into a little bit, just chatting about that conversation around obesity and health and how it's being treated at the moment. Um, but first I just wanted to ask about, so you're a registered dietitian now. There's a lot of confusion, I think, in the general public about just exactly what is the difference between a dietitian versus some people are what are called nutritionists. And then obviously you have, some people who are just personal trainers who dispense things like meal plans as well. So what's the fundamental difference between all of those things?
Yeah, it's actually it's a tough question to answer. Well, dietitians are registered healthcare professionals,
Mhm.
the same as physiotherapists are. Okay, so we use nutrition to promote health and to treat and to prevent diseases. Um, and because we're regulated healthcare professionals, we're regulated by an entity or an organization called CORU. And so we have to adhere to certain standards. And to get your dietitian qualification, you have to have done a certain amount of learning or education or degree. So it's either a 4 year undergraduate degree, which used to be the only case in Ireland. That was the only way you could become a dietitian, or now you can do a 2 years master's, provided that you've done some kind of undergraduate degree in a related field. So maybe
Mm.
it's like a science undergraduate degree. And as part of those education pathways, you have to have done 1,000 hours of placement. So you have to do 500 hours in the community setting and 500 hours in the hospital. So basically, the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian is that a nutritionist, there is no barrier to entry. So, you could. I remember listening to a podcast ages ago, and they were saying like they got their dog qualified as a nutritionist. You can just do a online course and call
Yeah, yeah,
this, right? There's no barrier to entry, but that doesn't mean that there's many nutritionists who are far smarter and more intelligent and know more than me with nutrition. But the difference is that if you're say going and say you're just part of the general public, and you're looking for some nutrition help, if you just go to a nutritionist, it's kind of hit and miss. You aren't guaranteed that they'll have
yeah,
that level of education, whereas with a dietitian, you are. And dietitians are allowed, and we'll probably talk about meal plans, but they can prescribe certain nutrition to help, prevent or treat diseases,
mm,
whereas nutritionists shouldn't be doing that.
yeah, yeah. And
So
I
hopefully
think
that.
it's a conversation that happens a lot around personal training, like whether that should have, a governing body, and should
Mm,
the standards be higher and the barrier to entry be higher. And I don't know about your own perspective on this, but I've always thought that yes, it should be, and for the very reasons that you've described there, because I think a lot of the times people will say like, well, just because you do that, it's never going to be a guarantee that somebody that you go to is going to be good, which I'd
mm,
agree with. But I think what um, having things properly regulated like that does mean is that there's probably a bare minimum of standard that you're going to be exposed to. So I
yeah,
would think if somebody's gone through the process of a formalized education that prioritizes teaching them about the importance of evidence and the scientific method and stuff like that, I would think it's a lot less likely that you're going to get a registered dietitian who has you doing some absolutely batshit insane diet versus if you go to somebody who hasn't been put through that accreditation process.
yeah, I completely agree. And on the personal training side of things, like I think that's very much needed because even more than nutrition, like we know the benefits of exercise are just so important. And
Yeah,
from a public health point of view, like I think it'd be so beneficial that if you could have some kind of barrier to entry, and if exercise was somewhat like subsidized by the government, like it
yeah.
would just be a much better package and better
Mm.
for public health. But not sure that's going to happen.
Yeah, they usually like to wait until there's some kind of really significant reason to do that versus the risks if they don't. Um And going back to the personal trainer thing, like we see them dispensing nutrition advice quite a lot.
Mm.
I get a lot of people that come to me looking for nutrition help, and I do give people help on the nutrition side of things. But as you've noted there, I never overstep my scope into bounds of things like actual medical conditions, trying to help with that. And I personally never give people specific meal plans. I always work with them on things like building their habits around their food intake and making very kind of small, sustainable changes. What is your take on, because a lot of people will assume if they go to work with a nutritionist, dietitian, personal trainer, that they are going to be given an exact plan of specific foods to eat, even potentially at specific times. What is your take on that? And is that the approach that you take, or do you do something different?
Um, Yeah, so this comes up a lot with my clients and patients. So yeah, a lot of people, not most, but a lot would expect some kind of meal plan, and they want to be told what to do, which I completely understand. Like life's hard enough without having to make, more decisions in your
Yeah,
day. But I suppose the way I would explain it to a client or a patient is that, when you look up the definition of a diet, it's what people or communities habitually eat on a day-to-day basis. So, like we all have our own diets and we've all developed our own preferences over the past, for me, 28 years. I've lived in a certain environment. I still live in that environment.
Yeah.
I have certain taste preferences. I have a culture. Like, so there's so many factors that influence the way we eat or our current diets. And me just prescribing someone with, a cookie cutter meal plan, it is might whatever work means to that client at the time, right, might work for them in
Yeah.
the short term. But in the long term, as you said, in terms of habits, like it's not going to teach them anything sustainable. And it's just gonna, I suppose, cause them to possibly go backwards, might have a negative impact and cost them more money in the future. So I
Mhm.
would never prescribe a meal plan to anyone. I've never done that. I have, worked with certain clients where we go through a diet history and we kind of find out the typical meals that they like to eat, and then look at, okay, well, how can we improve those typical meals? And
Mhm.
then, I will send them on something that is improved versions of those meals, and they'd have different options.
Yeah.
But it's never the case of this is what I want you to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, best of luck.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to that idea of, you know, do people want to make seemingly very quick progress in a few weeks, but maybe sabotage themselves for the long term versus doing something that might not give that instant gratification of, oh my God, heaps of weight came off all at once, but it's something that I can actually integrate into my life going forward with things like holidays and social events and stuff like that. And it seems to be part of that all or nothing mindset that people have with nutrition. And I would imagine that that is probably one of the biggest barriers that you encounter. Certainly, I do anyway with people when I'm working with them on nutrition. That
Yeah,
doing that sort of stuff like, oh, I kind of went over my planned calorie intake for today, so I'll just write the rest of the week off and I'll start anew on Monday. Or for a lot of
yeah,
people, it's I'll start anew in January and the rest of the year is a
yeah,
write-off. Is that
yeah,
something you encounter a lot?
yeah. All the time. Like every single consult I have, I talk about the kind of the all or nothing mindset, but the opposite of that, which is, I suppose what I like to call continuum thinking, or getting comfortable in the gray.
Hmm.
And I really think that, if there was kind of one thing that I could talk to everyone about regarding their nutrition and exercise and just general life, is that, it will be that concept of continual thinking. So, like, as you said, most people just explain the kind of all or nothing mindset to people. It's, it's January 1st. I'm all in on my nutrition. Like, I'm not
Uh,
going to eat not going to eat any carbohydrates. I'm not drinking any alcohol. But then, 3 weeks later, it's your birthday, and so you've developed these rules. You've created rules for yourself,
yeah,
that do not fit into the modern world or your life, likely.
yeah,
And then 3 weeks later, it's your birthday. You're going out to a pizza restaurant. You're like, oh God, I can only have pizza here. So you have your pizza, obviously, but you feel like you failed. So you've set
yes,
yourself up for failure. You've broken that rule. And then that doesn't make us feel very good about ourselves. So we're like, you know what? Feck it. I'll continue it on in a few weeks' time, or just give up completely. But like, I don't. I'm say give up. Like, I don't mean like it's your fault. You've really just you've set yourself up for failure there. But like,
yeah,
it's not like you haven't failed. So
yeah,
it's all about the continuum thinking. Is kind of like, right. Well, firstly, never set yourself those rules. But how can I? With every kind of nutritional decision you make, it's like, well, what's kind of the worst case scenario here? What's the best case scenario? But what are all the possible decisions in between? Like, okay, I'm
mhm,
going out to the pizza restaurant. Um, okay, I'll just have the pizza. That's absolutely fine. You can just have the pizza. You don't have to worry about making it any more nutritious. But if you want to, you can have a little salad with that. Maybe
yeah,
you could have one less glass of wine. Maybe you could have a Diet Coke instead of a
mhm,
full sugar Coke. So there's loads of different options, but it's also being okay with eating whatever you want. Like, I'm not saying that that is a nutritious thing to do, but
yeah,
it's being okay with that and not thinking that you failed because of that.
mhm,
And that actually sets you up for much longer term progress, because those little small decisions over the course of your life really they add up to a lot,
yeah,
compared to I suppose, the yo-yo result of
mm.
all or nothing thinking. But this is really, we're designed, I think, as humans to be black and white and to be absolutes, and we like absolutes.
Yeah.
So it does take a lot of not dedication, it does take time to develop that skill set. And it's something that
Yeah.
I'm still working on. You know, I've probably started using that kind of mindset over the past 3 years or so, and I still find myself trying to switch back to that black and white thinking.
Yeah. And I think that if I think about all the people in my life who I would consider to have, you know, much more on the healthier side of a relationship with food and have a much more balanced view of things where, maybe they might, because they get brought out to some kind of social event where they don't have other options, they might just go for the pizza, but they have that ability then to bring balance to it the next day by saying, like, right, tomorrow I'm going to go for a longer walk than usual. I'm going to make some slightly better choices than I usually would to balance that out somewhat. It seems like the people that I've found struggle the most with nutrition, that's the part that they really struggle with. Just like being able to, accept a less than perfect choice for what it is and not beat themselves up about it, and then just, try to balance it out then the next day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, and as I said, like for some people that can take years, and it might be their whole life where they
Yeah.
always feel like they're getting pulled back into that
Mm,
black and white thinking. But I think, rather than, as I said, if I could just provide a bit of education to everyone about anything nutrition wise, it would probably be that, because that's something you can apply to any stage of your life, no
yeah.
matter your environment, rather than saying everyone needs to eat a bit more protein or anything. I think
Yeah.
it would have a bigger impact. Yeah, what was I going to say there? It's something else. Anyway, go on. I'll come back to it.
No, but I find that, like, I particularly related to what you were saying about that idea of not setting ourselves up for failure. So it's similar to what I do. Like when I get somebody who's brand new to training, hasn't been to the gym in months or maybe years or maybe ever, it's very, very rarely that I would get them started with anything more than about 2 days per week. Because the way I describe it to them is like, even if we just had you doing one session a week consistently, that would be a 100% increase in what you're expecting of yourself from a habit standpoint each week. And you would see a benefit from it regardless for at least the first few weeks. So why not set yourself up for an easy, nice low hurdle for feeling like you've had a successful 100% compliant week? And then I find once you start building that momentum of, proving to yourself that you can actually do the fitness thing, it's a lot easier. Like I would find it much easier to get somebody to go from doing 3 training sessions in a week to 4, because I've already started to form that
Yeah,
identity of I'm a person who makes the time for this, than I would getting somebody who struggles to do one session a week to go to 2, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I find the same. I suppose to even take that a step further, it's about that person who decides to do one a week. It's like getting them comfortable with the idea that life will get in the way and that
Mm.
you will probably miss that one session per week at some point. But like
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine. You get back in and when
Yeah.
you can't. So it's like making it seem like being like stricter with that person or more restrictive or more like a sergeant like doesn't help anyone. It just makes them
Yeah.
feel, I suppose, more guilty, and it makes the whole situation worse, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then the all or nothing mindset is something that I'd often, so I'd work with like a lot of patients and clients who have never done any kind of movement
Hmm.
in their life at all. And um, what I try to do is, work with them to develop kind of these movement minimums or exercise minimums. So it's like,
Hmm.
what's something you could do every day that's like so unbelievably small, like that it feels like nothing, but
Yeah.
it just gets you into that rhythm of movement and exercise. And as you say, kind of maybe creating a bit of an identity that you do movement and you partake in this. But
Yeah.
it might even be like a lot of people with me, it would be you're just going to walk up and down the stairs one
Mm.
extra time per day, and like that helps, I think, move away from that kind of all or nothing mindset, because a lot of people with exercise think that it has to be, it's January 1st, it has to be
Mm.
five hours a week, 1 hour a day, and you're just, as we've said a few times now, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
So making that kind of minimum really like unbelievably achievable, and that helps you get into the rhythm of it.
Yeah. It's like I always say to people that I want the things that we work on the start to be too easy. I want you to look at that and say that's not hard enough. And then that's usually when I know that that's a good place to start, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you touched on how you are working with is it called My Best Weight?
My best fit, shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was something I really wanted to chat to you about because I think that in the fitness industry in particular, and unfortunately amongst a lot of coaches, there's still a lot of disagreement and seeming controversy about obesity being labeled a disease and the discussion around how much of that is or is not directly within somebody's control. Um, so maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, where is the medical community or registered dietitians at the moment in terms of how obesity is viewed? And, what do you think are kind of some of the main determining factors that could lead to somebody being classified as obese or morbidly obese or beyond?
Mhm. Um, God, yes, where do I start? So I suppose like there shouldn't be controversy as to whether obesity is classified as a disease. Like it is classified as a disease by the World Health Organization,
Mhm.
and there's no controversy about other diseases being classed as but as a disease. So you know it is a disease, and the reason it's a disease is because our weight is influenced by many, many factors, and
Mhm.
people think that it's, or I suppose a lot of culture and society make us think that it's all within our control. But really, our weight and our appetite and our drive for food is controlled by the hypothalamus, or part of our brain, the same part of the brain that controls body temperature.
Yeah,
So I suppose that tells you how little of it is in our control. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not your responsibility, and I might get into that a little bit.
Mm.
But I suppose the reason I'm just going to, I suppose, talk broadly about obesity and what I normally talk to patients about. But
Sure.
obesity rates have been increasing now for the past 40, 50, 60 years, and our genetics are the same as they were thousands of years ago when we were hunter-gatherers.
Yeah,
Our genetics haven't really changed, but obesity rates have been increasing. But the environment has massively changed. So now there's never tasted so good. It's never been so easy to get. You don't have to work hard to get it. You don't have to
Mhm.
work hard really to make food. It's always within 5 minutes of us. It's marketed to us all the time. And this change in environment, plus our genetics, which are designed for us to be hunter gatherers. They're designed for us to store fat. We're really,
Yeah,
really good at storing fat because, tomorrow there may not be any food for a week or two, or we may
yeah,
have to go out and do a big hunt and find food. So it makes loads of sense. It's really clever from our bodies.
yeah,
But when you place it in the modern environment, as all the factors I've just said, that results in a gain of fat. Okay. And I suppose what obesity is just excess fat deposits that can have a negative effect on our health. Um yeah. So with then I suppose with there's three different treatments
yeah,
for the disease of obesity. So the main three pathways are kind of behavioral, which goes down the diet and lifestyle route. Then there's medication, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have learned a lot more about, maybe or heard a lot more about in the last 2, 3 years.
yeah.
And then there's surgery as well, and
Mhm.
all are valid pathways for a patient to go down. And it's really kind of up to them to make that decision with their doctor.
Yeah,
And the I suppose which route they go down, as I said, it is up to the patient and depends on what they want to achieve and etc. But with My Best Weight Health, I suppose And that's the program I now run with the obesity clinic, My Best
Yeah.
Weight. And why I suppose I wanted to create that program and they wanted to create the program is because there's such a um, there's such a focus in the health and fitness industry that it's always weight loss driven or weight loss focused,
Hmm.
and that makes it seem like weight is fully in our control and that people living with obesity are lazy or have a lack of willpower or lack of motivation.
Hmm.
Um, but and that makes it really hard because people living with obesity use nutrition or get told by nutritionists or maybe some dietitians that you need to eat less, you need to move more.
Hmm.
And then there's very little let's say 6 months time that person might lose weight because weight loss isn't so much the part that is an issue, it's more the rate of or the amount of weight gain. So oftentimes people will lose weight, and a lot of us, I'm sure, have experienced this ourselves. I have. We tend to always go back to the point we were at,
Yeah.
and with that weight we were at, and that's kind of called the set point theory.
Yeah.
Um, so our body's always trying to defend a certain weight,
Hmm.
um, and so um, with with nutrition, what I try to do with patients is that okay, you're living with the disease of obesity. Let's explore different pathways with your doctor. Maybe let's say it's medication is the route they
Hmm.
want to go down. Let's now use nutrition as a way to improve your health or focus on health gain. So
Yeah.
rather than that patient having always focused on calorie restriction and weight loss, now they can finally be like, okay, well, the medication has reduced my appetite, reduced my drive for food. I can now focus on eating more protein to help my
Yeah.
muscle mass. I can now focus on eating more veggies to help my digestive system,
Hmm.
to prevent other diseases later on in life and so on. So it can be
Yeah.
quite, let's say, freeing for the patients that they can now use nutrition and movement to improve their health rather than a weight loss method.
Yeah.
Now, I know I've rambled there, so please ask me more questions.
No, no, yep. I mean, I do want to hone in on one part of that for sure. And really, I'm playing devil's advocate here because, I agree with your stance on all of this stuff. But, um, I think a really common thing that people will respond to that information with is that, yes, but it's still within your control. They'll say things like it's up to you whether you eat the chocolate bar, whether you order the takeaway, and that, talking about genetics, etc., isn't doing people any favors because they still ultimately have to do the work, and
Mm,
what would you say to that? Is the work that has to be done an equal, is it the same for everybody? Does everybody have to battle willpower and hunger hormones the same? Is it fair to say that it's as easy for one person to just say no to getting a takeaway as somebody else?
yeah. No, it's completely different. I suppose that there's many different ways you can answer that question, but if it so we know that height is our the genetic predisposition for us to be a certain height
Mm,
is about 70%, or our height is controlled by about 70% of our genetics. Okay, so if
mm,
you are born into a tall family, right, it's likely that you're going to be tall. Okay.
mm,
And we know that our weight is about 70% as well. So like
right.
you're not going around saying to kids as they're getting taller, being like, would you ever get a bit smaller there? Like,
Yeah.
so it's just because that I think food is such a big part of our lives that you know, we all like to have a big interest in food and we all eat all the frequently. Obviously, we all eat every day in different types of foods, and that people like to have, I think, such a strong opinion on this. That might be
Mm,
one reason. Um, some people are born with a stronger drive to eat than others, and that comes back to that part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Like some people have a
yeah.
bigger appetite than others. Like trying to tell yourself that you're not hungry, as the doctor I work with, Dr. Nick Crowley says, is like, trying to tell yourself to cool down or turn down your temperature. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay, when you're going to have that chocolate bar, right? Maybe that one time you got to have that chocolate bar. Yes, you could tell yourself not to have that chocolate bar or have
Yeah.
something else, right? But that's it. Over time, over the course of your life, when life gets in the way, stresses,
Yeah.
relationships, whatever part of the world you're born into. Like there's so many factors that over time you're going to have that chocolate bar, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. And a lot of times, um, obesity rates in like actually new data just came out there a few weeks ago. I think it was from the CDC or the Centers for Disease, showed that obesity rates have decreased in the past 3 years,
I saw
which
that.
is
Yeah.
great. Which is great, probably down to a lot of the use of medications now. But
Yeah.
my point was that obesity rates in kind of higher socioeconomic status areas are more level or decreasing than in more kind of lower socioeconomic status areas. So
Yes.
that's largely down to the food environment. So, big food corporations, big fast food chains will target these areas, and it's called food deserts in the
Yes.
research. So,
Yeah.
like, there's lots of food deserts in, let's say, poor places because they know that um, they can provide cheaper food than,
Mm.
let's say, a Tesco can or whatever, where there might be more nutritious options. So, to say that it's willpower and lack of motivation is just extremely simplistic when you consider the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And of course, some of us are more privileged, like to be educated in the area or to live in an environment where it's easy to make choices like
Yeah.
that. But a lot of people aren't. And I always think to myself, like I'm a dietitian. I work in the gym.
Yeah.
I was brought up in a privileged family, privileged situation. I've everything, let's say, helping me to
Mm.
not gain weight. Yes, yet I really struggle to not gain weight. So
Yeah.
like okay, N equals one, I understand, but there's lots of research supporting that same theory, and many of my clients
Hmm.
who come to see me, are extremely well educated. They're very successful in other parts of their lives,
Mm.
and they work, really high, let's say, um, well-paid jobs. And they're kind of asking because this is the main message across society and culture that it's your fault, it's lack of motivation. They're kind of saying, well, why can't I use these same skill sets to help me succeed in other lives to help bring down my weight? And
Yeah.
and the reason they can't is because again it comes back to many other factors, and
Yeah.
that I suppose our brain controlling our weight.
I think it's easy to forget as well that if you are coming from a worse off socioeconomic background, food is a stress reliever, and you know, we all have stressful lives, but you know, the stress of getting through rush hour traffic to get to a middle class office job in the morning probably isn't the exact same stress as when you're stressed about meeting basic needs like being able to pay for food for your kids and stuff like that. Um, and
Yeah.
and you would have to think that that has a role to play in where people look. I mean, we even see like higher smoking rates and drinking and stuff like that in people who are in worse off socioeconomic statuses. So I would assume that that has a role to play as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's thousands of factors influence our
Hmm.
weight.
Yeah.
And I was reading a piece of research there recently that we roughly make 220 food decisions every day. So as you were saying, like, could you not just not eat that chocolate bar? But like you're making 220 decisions over time,
Mm.
you're gonna eat the chocolate bar or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But the answer that you were kind of briefly speaking there about kind of public health and how like sorry, go on. I'll let you ask a question. I'll go back to that.
Well, I mean, the next thing I was going to ask was actually going to be about Ozempic. So we're kind of a
Okay.
slight divergence there, but that's become something that people are a lot more aware about now. As far as I know, it started off as a drug for treating diabetes, and then they realized that there was this other appetite suppression effects from it.
Mhm.
Um, do you think that it is? Well, healthy and safe for people to be taking? And is it something that you think can work in the long term? Because obviously people also go for things like gastric bypasses and stuff like that. And some people will speculate, oh, well, it doesn't, help you actually change your relationship with food or build habits or stuff like that. So what's your take on Ozempic then?
I suppose firstly, if you are considering, if you're living with obesity and you are considering your different treatment pathways, speak to your GP. Don't listen to me, in my opinion, on
Hmm.
Ozempic, or go seek, an obesity specialist. But you know, as you said, Ozempic is a brand, a brand name for a drug called semaglutide. And as you said, it's been used to treat diabetes for the past 30 years or so.
Mm.
And it works quite effectively. But yeah, there is, I suppose, more recent research has come out showing how effective it can be for weight loss. And if you remember, kind of a few minutes ago in the podcast, I was talking about the hypothalamus and
Yeah.
a part of our brain that kind of regulates our appetite. And what the people living with obesity tend to have really high appetites, or they feel hungry frequently. And this type of medication called semaglutide is what's called a GLP agonist. So it basically mimics a hormone that's secreted in our gut called GLP, and it helps us, or it makes us feel more full after we eat. And that's how it then reduces our intake of food, and then leads to weight loss.
Yeah.
They're very safe and effective, but of course they have to be used in the correct situation, and that's for you and your doctor to decide, I suppose. There is a lot of misuse of these drugs.
Yeah, it seems to be something that celebrities are using to kind of get a few easy pounds shed off for
Yeah.
photos and movies and stuff like that, and obviously not the correct application.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, is the objective to try to get people off of those drugs then eventually? Do you think that there's people who would need to stay on them basically permanently? Is the objective to, start helping them form good enough habits then around food that they don't need to use the medication at all?
The medications at the moment are for life. So just
Mm.
like if you had high blood pressure, and you took your blood pressure medication, or if it was asthma, you're taking your inhaler. Like once you stop taking that medication,
Yeah.
that that's your symptoms are going to come back, or the disease is going to come back, and that's similar to obesity. So once you stop taking your anti-obesity medications, your appetite is going to come back. You're going to
Mm.
start eating more again. So they are, at the moment, they're lifelong drugs.
Okay. Um, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was so there's been a lot of talk on social media over the last few years about things like body positivity, and not stigmatizing people for being obese. One thing that comes up a lot and again gets discussed quite heavily, particularly in the fitness community, is this idea or claim that, somebody's body fatness is not like an indication of how healthy they are as a person. Um, so people will say like, yes, I'm overweight, but my blood work looks good and I exercise and I eat nutritiously. I'm just carrying more body weight or more body fat than other people. Is there a limitation to that? I mean, I would assume that if somebody is carrying a lot of body fat, there's still a likelihood that that is going to be having an impact on their heart health long term.
Um, so there is obviously, yeah, statistically there is that increase, but we shouldn't assume that if someone's living in a larger body or living with obesity that have they are in worse health than someone else, if
Mm,
that makes sense. Just like the opposite can be true as well.
yeah.
People with really, really low body fat, we shouldn't assume that they're, let's say, less healthy than someone who's a normal body weight. So I think that kind of contributes to the weight bias or weight stigma that people living with
Mm,
obesity, they're, I see it quite frequently in the gym here, like where people who are living with obesity are maybe treated differently, or it's expected that they can't do certain things, but really, they may be able to. You don't know that.
Yeah,
And I think that's quite important. I don't think there's any merit to thinking that someone who is living with obesity is any less healthy than anyone else. So I think that brings anything positive to the equation, really.
right.
Now, I'm not saying that body fatness has nothing to do with health.
Hmm.
Okay. Like if you are living with obesity and you're experiencing, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, prediabetes, diabetes, whatever it is, it's likely that a reduction in body fatness will
Hmm.
improve those comorbidities.
Yeah.
Um, but that might require medication, it might require surgery.
Hmm.
Did that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah, I think maybe the one thing that people would wonder there is if we were looking at it strictly from an optimality standpoint. So obviously you could be, say, 30% body fat as a male and uh, in much better health than somebody who is 12 or 15%, but is, heavy smoker, heavy drinker, doesn't exercise, etc. Assuming we're doing all the right things, um, do you think that there's good reason to assume that, I mean, the figure that usually gets quoted is that like you want to be below 20% body fat for a male. Do you think that there is validity to saying that that's something that you should aim for if you wanted like to optimize your health?
I mean, I'm not sure there's any point in that, if that makes sense. If there's any
Mm.
point in using the 20% body fat as a rule, if that
Okay,
makes sense. I think it would be better to look at maybe your body fat levels, whether you think they're having a negative impact on your health or not.
sure.
Is it affecting your psychological health, which is a big factor? The stigma people experience who maybe are carrying extra body fat can be like it can really affect their lives.
Yeah.
Maybe it's affecting your mobility. Maybe you have a strong history of, there's a strong family history of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and you want to really focus on prevention on that later in life.
Mm.
Then okay, I think I would really benefit from a reduction in my body fat levels.
Right.
How can I now go about that, in a obviously an evidence-based way?
And certainly on the more extreme end of things with, trying to get down in body fat, my experience seeing a lot of people do that, not that I've worked with personally, but just being around gym settings, say people that really want to get to like sub 15% body fat or whatever, closer to 10. Um, I think it's important for people to consider what effects that's going to have on the rest of their health, like how that's going to affect their social life, their psychological well-being, their relationship with food being a big one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, I know that, people engage in bodybuilding as a hobby and even at higher levels as a professional type thing, but I think in the fitness industry, there's this big fixation on doing things like photo shoots and getting shredded and stuff like that. And I would have to think that it's not a great fit for the average person to be viewing food through that lens, and they're hyper fixating on their body fatness to that degree.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree. And when we do lose a lot of body fat, you know, straight away your body starts trying to get you back up to
Mm.
that kind of set point or where you were before.
I've heard people
So
refer to that as quote starvation mode, but then I've also heard that that's kind of a myth.
yeah, I think what people are referring to when they say starvation mode maybe is that yeah, when you lose body fat, your body starts conserving more energy. So
Yeah.
exercise actually becomes more efficient. So if you were to run a 5K
Hmm.
in an energy deficit, so when you're taking in less calories than your body requires, you'd actually burn less energy than if you ran a 5K in an
Sure.
energy surplus. So we start to conserve energy. You can even see this in for example, I'm moving my hands a lot now. If I was in quite an energy deficit, I may not be doing that as much.
Yeah.
And these things really add up, to quite a lot of energy over the course of the
Mm.
day. You may actually just push yourself a little less hard in the gym, for example. You may your hunger hormones will increase, so your drive for food will increase. And
Yeah.
there's only so long you can tell yourself that you're not hungry. There's only so long you can, I don't know, these are all the crazy things that I've probably done in the past, like drink fizzy water to stave off your appetite.
Yeah.
Really focus on eating as much voluminous food. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
God, it's a grim existence.
Yeah.
um, and I work, most days I'd speak to people who have I suppose now have repercussions of the diet culture
Mm.
that's around. They'd feel strongly about certain foods. They'd feel guilty after eating certain foods. They upset about the weighing scales a lot.
Yeah.
That would really dictate how their day goes. Um, and I suppose it's a bit of a pity. Like diet culture exists everywhere. Like a common one I see is just like skinny cappuccino. When you're ordering a cappuccino, skinny. Like, why is it a skinny cappuccino? It's a low fat cappuccino, but like diet
Yeah.
culture has
Yeah.
made it be a skinny cappuccino.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, did I answer your question there?
Yeah. Yeah.
The starvation
Absolutely.
mode, I suppose. Starvation mode is conserving energy. As you lose fat, you will conserve energy. Your appetite will increase. So your energy output will decrease. Your energy input will always be trying to increase to get you back to where you were. And some
Mhm.
people, that's much stronger than others, as I've kind of alluded to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and where would you do you have kind of like a process that you go through when you start working with somebody to decide what you're going to um kind of focus on first with them, like where you're going to try to build a habit or a particular meal you're going to start with?
Yeah. The first question I ask everyone when they come into me is, why are you here? And that kind of opens it up to be for them to tell their story, and everyone has a different story about why they're here.
Yeah.
Um, and from there, it's just a very I've gotten better at it over time, but it's just a very open conversation. And most people, a lot of people again will cry when they come into me to talk about nutrition, because it just has such a big impact on our lives. And
Yeah.
there's so many reasons why we are a certain way, or like previous
Mm.
things that may have happened to us in our lives. So Um, and then at the end of the consult, I'll start with why you're here, go into detailed history, what they've, any medical conditions, et cetera, what they've tried before, go through a diet history, and always letting the patient or client do pretty much all the talking, and I'll just probe here or there. And then at the end, it's like, okay, well, what's one thing you would like to work on today, or what's one thing you think that would make the biggest difference to your nutrition or
Sure.
health or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So it's dictated by them. It's not dictated by me at all.
Yeah.
I will just help guide them, and the evidence suggests that's kind of like patient client led, basically.
Yeah.
And the evidence suggests that that works the best for long term behavior change.
Yeah.
But I also send them a questionnaire as well to fill out beforehand, which can be sometimes helpful.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that it sounds similar to what I'm doing, so I must be doing something right
Yeah.
then.
Oh
Um,
yeah, listen, I'm sure you're doing great.
definitely no meal plans being sent to people anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm using actually
so
the Precision Nutrition Pro Coach software. If you're ever looking for a nutrition software, I think it's the best one I find. It's very
okay.
much habit based. Looking
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Oh yeah, I'm all about definitely just, working on habits with people and trying to make it sustainable and work around their life and everything they have going on. Um, I think that's all very interesting stuff. And something I really like to do as well when I have coaches on for a chat is to get an idea about, what's influencing them and also things that maybe they might have made some changes in their practice with recently. So the first thing that I usually like to ask is there any kind of book that you would really recommend? And it doesn't have to be nutrition focused, just something that you think would be really worthwhile people reading that you think has a lot of value in it.
Um, so yeah, there's a book that I read about 2 to 3 years ago. This is nothing to do with uh, nutrition or exercise or anything. It's
Sure.
called When Breath Becomes Air, and it's written by or was written by a doctor, a neurosurgeon who was diagnosed with cancer.
I've heard about this actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and I I read it at the time because my dad was sick, and I feel like it really helped me. So I think it might help people who maybe have a relative who is ill and they
Yeah.
might benefit from it. Kind of talks, it goes through, it starts off about his medical career and some really interesting stories from his medical career, and then kind of goes into when he's diagnosed with cancer. And obviously, because he's in the field, it was, it's always a shock for someone, but like maybe a bigger shock for him, or just something he had to work hard to get his head around. And then
Yeah.
at the end, kind of goes into how you can maybe find meaning in your life when you know you're going to die. So
Yeah.
I found it really interesting. It's quite emotional, especially at the end.
Yeah.
But so that was one book I was going to recommend, and the other one was I don't know if you read The Daily Stoic.
I've seen excerpts and stuff like that, but I've never actually read the full thing.
Yeah. So it's this. It's about stoicism, which I kind of I suppose like to read about and practice where possible. And it's a lesson every single day. So
Yeah.
every day you read a new page. I don't do it like that. I just try read it whenever I get a chance. I'm not an amazing reader, to know. I'd like to read a lot more, but I
I
don't.
find I find audiobooks are a good way of
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
through books while you're, driving or walking or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I'd listen to a lot more stuff than read.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Daily Stoic would be good just for a daily lesson on
Mm,
Stoicism. It's very, I suppose, applicable to all avenues of life.
yeah, 100%. Sorry, that's my cuckoo clock there.
Uh, I can't do
And
it.
is there anything that you've changed your mind on recently? And I'm always aware when I ask this question that, very rarely do good coaches make like a 180 snap change to something
Mm.
completely different from what they've ever believed in. But like even if you were to think about maybe a few years ago, something you might have held quite a strong belief on. Is there anything that's like significantly shifted since then?
Yeah, it's funny you say that you know, maybe good coaches don't change their mind quickly. Not that I'm saying I'm a good coach, but like I was talking about this question to a friend of mine, and he was like, "You don't really change your mind too often."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, well, I think I just like very slowly changed my
Hmm.
mind." But one thing that it's not a sudden change of mind, but I suppose over the past 2 to 3 years, maybe a bit longer, like I come from a powerlifting background, so I did a lot of
Sure.
powerlifting, and you know, that was always I suppose, like for example, I'd be in the gym doing powerlifting. I'd be looking at other people like doing stupid things, like I don't know, kickbacks with the cable
Yeah.
extension, whatever it is. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I judged them, and I'd be like, "What are you
Mm,
doing? Like, it's so ineffective." And
mm,
everyone should be doing a progressive strength training program.
yeah.
But now, over the past few years, I've kind of realized that like you have to find what you somewhat enjoy. There has to be
Yeah.
some level of enjoyment. Any exercise is better than nothing. So like I've
Yeah.
kind of gone away from pushing that you have to do resistance training. There's
Mm,
so many things we can do, and I suppose there's a real public health message. It's just like anything's better than nothing. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Just get out there and do something. And
yes.
that's probably what I've changed my mind on. The biggest thing I've changed my mind on in terms of the health and fitness side of things, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd fully agree. I've become an awful lot more flexible with the exercises that I'm willing to program for people, the approaches that I'm willing to take, because really, unless somebody has already crossed into that realm of being like a strength training hobbyist, um, none of those things really matter unless they're doing it consistently anyway. So, if somebody really even struggles to go to the gym, but loves going out on hikes or loves going swimming or whatever, all of that is so much better than the alternative of sitting on the couch.
Yeah,
So yeah, I would agree. That's something that I've definitely come around to as well in recent years, and kind of knowing who's in front of you and who you're working with and what they actually genuinely need to see progress, and move on. Like I can remember years ago trying to get 60 or 70-year-old guy to do a back squat. And even though it was only like a 5 kilo bar, he just didn't want to do it, you know? And I could have just got him doing a body weight squat to a box. I could have got him pushing an empty sled, and he probably would have still got about the same benefits because he was starting from such a low point in terms of strength and conditioning. So yeah, no, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And I suppose like
Um,
happiness is the ultimate metric, I think. Like, and it's like,
yeah,
yeah, you have to be happy. And some people are genuinely happy without doing anything, any form of exercise, you know? So like, that's just the way it is.
yeah, yeah. Josh, thank you so much for sharing your time there. I'm sure anybody who's listened to this point will have got a huge amount of value from that. Lots of good information in there about things to do with the developing science and obesity and just general nutrition tips and tricks there. If people want to find you, to follow more of your content, and then even if they want to go and say like book a consultation with you or something like that, where should they go?
Instagram. So Josh Percival underscore RD is my handle on Instagram. Something as you've probably seen, I'm trying to do a bit more of at the moment.
Yeah,
So
the videos are really good.
thank you. I'd appreciate a follow there, I suppose. And if you want to work with me, I think the best place to get me is just to message me there. And then if you do you have footnotes for this, Kill, do you or
Yeah, I
no?
can put stuff
Yeah.
in the show notes.
Yeah, I might just put a few links to obesity and kind of the more modern approach to how we treat it. Just because I'm sure I've said stuff there that probably didn't make sense. So if anyone wants to read the research to help change their mind on the disease, I'll provide some stuff.
All right, awesome. I'll be sure to pop that in. Thanks so much, man.
Cool.